The day that this video is going live is October 4th of 2021, which marks 363 days of Baldur's Gate 3's early access. The 1-year early access anniversary is just 2 days away, and maybe, just maybe, Larian will give us an update on the current state of the game, or perhaps a little something on the upcoming patch 6. Now, I did wake up this morning to a tweet from Larian Studios where they said we're bringing Baldur's Gate 3 to EGX with something positively magical for you to get your hands on in-game. And EGX will take place from October 7th through the 10th, and I'll be sure to cover any news on Baldur's Gate 3 right here on this channel, so stay tuned. Now, some of you guys might remember the first time that many of us heard about Baldur's Gate 3 was all the way back in June of 2019 with the release of the announcement trailer. So almost 2.5 years ago that we got to watch some Ceramorphosis. I'm not gonna lie, I'm almost getting a nostalgic feeling while watching that trailer. It's really crazy how fast time flies. In terms of the game's official release date, all that we currently know is that Larian is shooting for sometime in 2022, but I would say that with the state of the world over the past couple years, and its current state, combined with the sheer amount of work going into Baldur's Gate 3, it might even be wise to keep an early to mid 2023 release date in the realm of possibility. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about why Baldur's Gate 3 is taking so long, and also whether or not early access is a good thing, which can be a controversial subject. And to end it, we'll talk about whether or not Larian released early access too early for Baldur's Gate 3. But before we get into it, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you that have been supporting this channel, especially since the early Baldur's Gate 3 hype days. Up to this point, I've done over 130 Baldur's Gate 3 focused videos, and some of you guys have been around for almost all of them, and I am eternally thankful. I also want to give a quick shout out to a fellow content creator, Harbs Narbs. I'll put a link to his channel below. He's been doing amazing lore and theory crafting videos for quite a while now and posting very consistently, so he really deserves to be projected into that YouTube algorithm heaven. Let's get him to 6K with this video. I know we can do it. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Larian Studios began development for Baldur's Gate 3 in 2017, shortly after the release of Divinity Original Sin 2. So if Baldur's Gate 3 releases in late 2022, it would have a development time of over 5 years, possibly closer to 6 if it doesn't make that 2022 goal. Now keep in mind that Larian has had over 250 employees for a good amount of the development time, and they currently now have 300 plus. Putting that in perspective, DOS 2 took Larian around 3 years, give or take, with a team of around 150 employees. So Larian is almost doubling their dev time and resources for Baldur's Gate 3. A couple other examples, Pillars of Eternity took Obsidian around 2 years with 100 or so devs. Pathfinder Kingmaker took Owlcat just over 2, and Wrath of the Righteous took around 3, and Owlcat for the most part has had less than 50 employees. Stepping out of the CRPG genre, The Witcher 3 took 3.5 to 4 years to make with around 150 to 250 devs, and Skyrim took over 5 with around 100 devs. But keep in mind that the Bethesda team was split up working on Fallout 3 until 2008. So the point being is that Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of up there in development time and resources required. But why would this be, and what makes this game so different? First and foremost, as most of us are aware, besides perhaps a few WoW addicts, the last 1.5 years or so have been an interesting time to be alive on planet Earth. The efficiency of production has been down for many companies, and this includes our favorite game studios. Now, I don't know exactly how much this adds to a game's development time, but I think we can all agree that most games would be further along or have released earlier if we didn't have to go through our zombie apocalypse. But despite the pandemic, Baldur's Gate 3 is still a massive, massive project. It's a game where the majority of the players, even after completion of the game, will still likely not have experienced probably 50+% of the content that is available in the game. Now, the overall plot, the major places that you go, and many of the characters that you meet will be similar from player to player, but how the story actually unfolds in your personal journey will likely be very different from many others. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game of player agency, from character creation to character development to where and how you go about responding to different situations. Are you going to be good or evil, or perhaps a bit of both? What companions will you take with you on your journey, and how will you treat them, which will also determine how they treat you? What order will you handle the quests in? And of course, we can't forget, will the die be in your favor? All of this really does have rippling effects and creates a unique experience for every player, and having a game that can achieve this level of player agency successfully, simply stated, is a crap ton of work. I've always admired companies who are willing to take on projects like this, because in truth, they could do a much more smaller linear style game that would take half the time and resources and still possibly be wildly successful. When Larian spends valuable time working on an outcome that the game has designed specifically for players who handle a situation in a more evil manner, they're doing this also knowing that many players don't do evil things in games, and therefore they will likely never even know that that content exists. So in my opinion, companies who are willing to create all of this content that will not even be seen by many of the players are pretty amazing, and most companies would not even consider going down this path, and understandably so. Another thing that I should point out is that the choices that you make in character creation, race, class, and perhaps even who you worship, all of this also has rippling effects on the entire game. A drow playthrough will be different than a dwarf playthrough. So even if you plan on playing the game in the same exact manner but with a different race, it's still not going to necessarily play out the same way. So when we all yell at Larian to add another race into the game, many of us are forgetting that it's not as easy as just throwing a new race into character creation. Many races require hundreds, if not thousands, of new dialogue lines and much, much more. So I'm sure by now that most of you can at the very least understand how large of a project this game truly is, and I'm only cracking at the surface of its player agency. Games like this take a lot of time. But player agency isn't the only area that Larian is attempting to raise the bar. Those of you who have played Early Access would have noticed that every single NPC that you talk to is fully voice acted and comes with their own cinematic dialogue scene. It's actually pretty crazy. Now personally, I don't even think that this is 100% necessary, but it's still amazing. If you played Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, you'll notice that the voice acting is absent from a lot of the game. Even some parts that you were thinking that were part of the main storyline, there's nothing there. And the reason being is because it takes a lot of money and of course time. On top of just the voice acting, Larian is adding cutscenes for all of these dialogue scenes. So they're really going the extra mile with many things in BG3, which naturally makes it take longer than other games in a similar genre. Alright, moving on. So is early access even a good thing? Well, many people will argue that early access is a predatory, greedy practice that companies use and abuse to get money early. And I have to say that I do agree in a general sense. It feels like early access games are everywhere these days, and we're not even getting many official game releases. Some companies have absolutely taken advantage of consumers who participate in early access. And when the game releases, if ever, nothing really has been fixed, changed, or updated. But this is where I think it comes down to individual companies. Larian Studios at this time is a company that I think many of us do trust, much more so than many of the other behemoths of the industry. Also keep in mind that despite how big Larian has become, they are still an indie company. With DOS 2, Larian already demonstrated to us that early access is something that they do take very seriously, and that it is a huge help to the development of their game. The more complex that a game gets, and CRPGs tend to be a bit more on the complex side of gaming, the more testing that it needs. Sometimes hiring game testers is just not enough. Could Larian have just done early access for free and invited the general public? Well, sure, they could have, but we do have to keep in mind that they are a business, and I would guess that some early funding for their massive project is something that does help the development of the game. And also, putting a price on early access will ensure that the majority of players who do purchase the game are likely taking it seriously to some extent. These are the players that you want testing your game and providing feedback. Let's also not forget that it is your personal choice to spend that $60 and participate in an unfinished product. No one is forcing you to buy it, and from everything I've seen up to this point, Larian is not being deceitful with it. Is $60 too much though to charge for early access? Well, yeah, maybe they could have charged less, and that could be debated. But like I said, there are different ways to look at this with a company like Larian. I personally already know that I'll be spending the $60 when the game comes out, so I don't mind spending it now and helping out the company. It's basically like pre-ordering the game and then the company thanking you by giving you access to a small portion of their game early. And remember, you don't have to participate in this if you don't want to. So look, I do understand that there are different opinions on this, and in general, I do think that the early access movement in the gaming industry has caused probably more harm than good. But with certain games and companies, it seems to be a huge help and leads to a far better product. And for the last question, was early access released too early for Baldur's Gate 3? We're coming up on a year now, and it looks like we have at least one more. And this is where I do wish that Larian would have made it a little more clear about their idea for at least the release year of the official game. If you did do any research, you would have known that the release year was still an unknown entity when you bought early access. But I do think and understand that many players probably expected this game to be released sometime in late 2021, around the year mark of early access. Many of these players were let down when Larian recently announced that they were hoping for a 2022 release. Does feel a little weird to pay for a game and then not be able to play the full version until 2 to 3 years later, so I absolutely understand. Simply because we're used to the 1-year time frame for an early access, not one as long as this one is turning out to be. But if we were to cut Larian some slack, these are some pretty crazy times in the world, and I don't think any company could have predicted what it would do to their development time, especially a company creating a game so massive and complex as Baldur's Gate 3, which is already naturally going to be rather unpredictable. In terms of the game itself being in early access for so long, I don't really mind it as long as Larian is continuing to work their asses off on it. Most of us are sick of getting low quality rushed games, and it's actually a tad refreshing to see a company care more about quality and ensuring that they get it right over rushing the game out for more money. All of this time in early access gives Larian the time to ensure that the foundation of the game is right, and there's actually time to make necessary changes and see how those changes play out. The most recent patch 5 is a great example of changes and additions to core features in the game that came from player feedback in early access. Patch 5 is not a patch that could have been released a month or so before the game actually comes out. It needs time to go through its trials. So yeah, I want to play Baldur's Gate 3 as much as any other, but I would rather wait for it to be completely done regardless of how long that takes. I mean, if we're in the late 2020s, then yeah, I'm going to have a problem, but late 2022 or 2023, I'm going to be perfectly okay with, as long as we get that quality product that we're seemingly going to get. I do feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be a game that raises the bar in the gaming industry. Even if you don't like the game, I think a lot of people will be able to respect a lot of what this game brings, and it will really make companies realize that quality can in fact win over quantity.